In this edition of Art Rocks, ceramic surface design inspired by Louisiana's plant life.
You live in Louisiana, you can't help but be influenced by the semi-tropical climate we've got and the floral designs that we see all around us.
See the mathematical beauty behind a hot air balloon ride.
The other thing about fractals is that they're infinite. People are touched and moved and inspired because they've come face to face with infinity.
A beloved 50s television comedy reimagined on stage.
If you were to just walk to the table read and you didn't know who she was, you would say, you need to fire that redhead.
And a refurbished Tapestry reveals wonderful colors never seen before.
It was cleaned. It had this heavy gray pallor of particulate soils all over it that have now been removed.
It's all ahead on this edition of Art Rocks.
Art Rocks is made possible by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you.
Hello, I'm James Fox Smith, publisher of Country Roads magazine, and this is Art Rocks. We begin today with an artist whose love of nature is translated directly to his work. Most potters would be satisfied with skillfully wheel-thrown classic shapes formed out of clay, but for Ken Tracy, that's just the beginning.
I'm Ken Tracy, and I'm from Pineville, and I work in clay. Well, I've been influenced by, you live in Louisiana, you can't help but be influenced by the semi-tropical climate we've got and the floral designs that we see all around us. So I get my influence from that. I have my master's degree in painting, but decided that pottery was more fulfilling to me. I enjoyed it more. Well, I'm definitely a decorator, as you can see from my work, and so all that hand carving, it's actually just a type of drawing for me to be able to take that drawing and work with the motifs that way, and to be able to work three-dimensional, it's more of a challenge than working on a flat surface. Well, I have a lot of people that ask, well, is it ceramics or is it pottery? And I always stress that it is wheel thrown, and the designs are hand carved through a cobalt slit that's applied to it. So there is a lot of work in, handwork in each piece, and each one is one of a kind. I've always been one to work with my hands. In working with painting, I always worked in color field abstraction, and it always seemed a bit aloof and distant, but to actually work with clay in your hands and to be able to handle it with and manipulate the clay, it's more rewarding because you're more personal with the clay. You're just taking nothing and making form and function with it, things that people can use, but then more importantly is to be able to do the decorative aspects of it, which I have the best of all aspects of a craft, is to be able to do the form plus the decorating, and because I look at myself as being a decorator, and that's important to me.
Ken Tracy's botanical designs are largely based on his study of native Louisiana plants. To see more of his work, visit kentracypottery.com. Now, let's take a look at some of the arts and cultural events happening soon in Louisiana. All Also throughout May, stop by the new East Baton Rouge Parish Main Library on Goodwood to see Covering Country Roads, an exhibit of original artwork featured on the covers of Country Roads magazine. For more information on these events, visit our website at lpb.org/artrocks. And you can find more arts events like these at countryroadsmag.com. In this next segment, we learn what happens when math and art collide. Mathematician and artist Dr. Johnathan Wolfe shares his love of fractals, infinitely complex, never-ending patterns that can be found throughout nature. It is in these forms that he finds artistic inspiration. Hakeem Bellamy has the story from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
I've been in love with fractals for like half my life now. Since I was in high school, I discovered them way back. As an artist, I saw the potential for making really, really beautiful patterns. I loved exploring them. As soon as I got a powerful computer in the early 90s, powerful relatively, but it was powerful enough to make mathematical fractals, I was captivated by these things and just on fire, loved them. I've been exploring them ever since, and had some ideas about turning them into public artworks, and it's finally come to fruition, and it's been a really interesting, amazing journey. So now there's fractals all around Albuquerque, and it's been really wonderful to watch this vision unfold.
What's your favorite way to express chaos theory through your art?
It's a good thing you bring up chaos theory because, well, fractals are the pictures of chaos theory. With the help of computers, we can visualize how fractal patterns grow and turn into these really beautiful things that echo the patterns of nature. And that's really the reason we care about fractals. Not just that they're pretty pictures, but they describe how the world works. So I like to say that fractals are the language of nature. But to answer your question, what are my favorite ways? I love flying over the city of Albuquerque in a fractal balloon. That's an exercise in chaos theory, because fractals and chaos really came from studying the weather. And as a balloon pilot, I'm exploring the chaotic dynamics of the atmosphere. And so it's an applied science, it's an applied art form. You know, you can turn on the TV news and hear a weather forecast, and they'll tell you the winds will be blowing out of the west at 10 miles an hour, as if that were the truth. And it's not, and we all know that, right? They do their best they can to predict things, but if the wind really was blowing at 10 miles an hour, what would happen at an event like Balloon Fiesta is we'd have 700 balloons take off, and they would all fly in a clump, and an hour later they would come out, they would land 10 miles to the east, right? That's what the wind did. And what that tells you is the atmosphere is actually doing this. It's swirling, it's spiraling, at all different scales, from tiny little dust devils to giant hurricanes. The atmosphere loves spiraling, and it moves in nonlinear ways. And it's hard to predict when you do things like that. But because these 700 balloons go all these different places, that tells you that if you know how to use the atmosphere, you can go any one of those different destinations.
How does that spark creativity?
Well, that's a good point. That's it's something I call butterfly power, because it's not brute force power, but it's butterfly power, and it's small changes. How does that spark creativity? Well, knowing that the system is dynamic and that it's nonlinear and it's interconnected, okay? And because of our interconnectedness and because of our innate creativity, I can have an idea and I can share it and I can inspire other people, and they share that and inspire other people, and pretty soon it ripples out, and it in fact does transform the world.
In a visual way, can you tell us a little bit about that math and how it creates pictures, how it creates these stunning visuals?
Fractals let you play with equations, tinker with them, and then see the result just right away. The fundamental lesson of chaos theory is that a small change early in a system leads to a big difference in the outcome. And it's in a nonlinear kind of relationship. So I make a small change, I get a big difference. You can actually see that. Any fractal is a complex, never-ending pattern that's made by repeating a simple process over and over again. Nature works that way by doing simple things again and again, but we can simulate that with equations. And usually, when you square a number, it gets bigger. You square the answer, it gets bigger. You square the answer, it gets bigger. It goes to infinity, but not always. And that's the key to fractal math in this fractal we call the Mandelbrot set. Some numbers, when you plug them into this equation, get smaller. And you plug the answer in, it gets smaller, and it spirals inward. It stays finite. Those are all the points that we call inside the Mandelbrot set. They're in the central black part of this fractal. And then it's surrounded by all these beautiful colors, and those colors represent all the points that fly off to infinity. And the colors aren't just arbitrary decorations, they're actually carrying information about the behavior of that equation, because any point that's in the same color will have the same behavior. It'll fly away at the same speed. And that's a really amazing insight, that equations actually behave like something. They're like living creatures. Different fractal equations have totally different styles. The other thing about fractals is that they're infinite. People are touched and moved and inspired because they've come face to face with infinity. Sure. And a lot of people find that a very spiritual experience, and it's pretty awesome.
Why do you think that's critical, that as an artist, you kind of create these experiences for people?
That's the role of the artist, right? Is to change how other people see the world. What's really fun about fractalizing Albuquerque, making us the fractal capital like this, is that it's not just my art. When I gave this project away and created the Albuquerque Fractal Challenge, what we do is we teach kids how to make fractal art, and we reproduce their art and blow it up big on the sides of buildings and schools and parking structures and things like that. Now there's lots of fractal art out there, and more coming soon. And it's like, whoa, we live in this really beautiful fractal world of creative, beautiful possibilities, and people are understanding that this is math, that this is what math looks like, and that we're part of what I like to call the fractal revolution. We're changing how we teach math and science, and we're doing so in an artistic way. My goal is not to turn everybody into an artist. That's really not the point. But I do want people to be looking at the world creatively. We've got big problems to solve. We need new ways of thinking, new ways of looking at the world, new ways of appreciating nonlinearity, interconnectedness, complexity. We have all science of chaos and complexity, but we need to adopt that in our culture. Our political leaders need to start thinking about complex systems and chaos theory and applying that instead of using brute force kind of solutions for these big problems. We need subtle, small changes. And that's what I hope is the underlying message of the fractal revolution.
Thank you for visiting with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Hakeem.
We're going to come take part in the fractal revolution.
That's right.
To learn more, visit fractalfoundation.org. Lucy Ricardo is the spirited Dame Lucille Ball, made instantly famous with her pioneering 1950s television show. Now, in a new stage adaptation that's been selling out across the country, I Love Lucy Live on Stage gives audiences a glimpse into the behind-the-scenes life of this comedic icon. Reporter Jared Bowen sits down with the actress stepping into those daunting shoes and red wig.
So Sirena Irwin, you are Lucy. What is it? What did you have to do to get her mannerisms? I mean, she's so iconic for everything, for her delivery, for her voice, for the physical comedy. So how did you get it all into you?
Well, step by step. I came from knowing absolutely nothing, which may have been a benefit at the time. I was terrified by that. So it set me into a deep action, deep work.
And we should explain, because you grew up in Massachusetts, but without a television set.
That's right.
But you came from artist parents, so we'll forgive you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And then when I was out on my own, I just still, for some reason, didn't tune into the TV, and ultimately started working with Paula Stewart, who was a friend of Lucille Ball's, and they had worked on Wildcat together. And she said to me, Sirena, you've got to check out I Love Lucy. You remind me of Lucille. And then shortly thereafter, I got the audition. And when I got the part, I tried to talk Rick Sparks, the director, out of giving me the part. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't think I know her well enough. Hire an impersonator. No, we don't want an impersonator. We want an actor that can capture her essence.
In terms of the actual physical process, as you were studying her, I'm sure mannerisms presented themselves. So how did you decipher the comedic code she had?
It's like Morse code. Her sense of timing is just impeccable, and I think it's such a difficult thing to actually get your fingers on in terms of that, because it really comes from an individual's heartbeat, like what I consider the heartbeat, the way everything courses through their body. And so her timing came out of that, and then of course watching Buster Keaton and working with him and working with all of the vaudeville performers who had mastered that before her, and then taught her, and then of course she was dealing with her incredible instrument. For me, it's watching what she did, and then dealing with my new situation, which is I'm working with Bill Mendieta as Ricky Ricardo, and Joanna Daniels as Ethel, and Kevin Remington as Fred, and we all have to be in those moments. And that might be one thing that I take from Lucy Ricardo and watching her. We have this idea of her being kind of kooky and zany, but she's super grounded too. And so I try and just keep that in as I move forward.
You mentioned telling the director to not cast you after the audition. I mean, you must have felt the weight of taking on such an iconic character and knowing that as much as you try, you're still going to be judged against the actual television show.
Of course, yeah. It was terrifying, absolutely. I mean, and it still is to a certain degree, but of course I've done the show I think almost 400 times now, and I am starting to just accept my own journey in this character, in this role, and I have done a tremendous amount of work, and I love doing it, and every night that I go out, it's a new opportunity to get it right, to have that perfect show. And Bill Mendieta, who plays Ricky, he and I have spoken of the reason we never tire of this is because we neither feel we've had that perfect show, because it's so complex, and to get every moment exactly right every time is for us so far impossible, but so much is still so fun and still vibrant and alive that we're just, interested in it, and we love it.
I've read that she was so fastidious about getting everything right and pointing out there was no ad-libbing in the show. Everything was scripted. The physical comedy was scripted. So how intensive are you about those efforts? And actually, I wanted to ask you about that. I know I'm asking multiple questions here, but
I love it.
The physical comedy, I mean, what was it? What did she do? How did she get it so right? I mean, and I have to say that I Love Lucy is one show that if I'm ever flipping through, I will stop. I never do that with any other show, but Lucy, and I think it's because of the physical comedy.
Yeah, you're right. And she's a master technician. And what I've read is that she would do it in front of a mirror. And she would, try something, no. Try something again, no. And then, yes, I mean, as you two have read and stated, it's like she worked tirelessly. From the accounts I've read, it's, she came in for the table read. Jess Oppenheimer, I think, in his book said, and he's the creator behind the show, producer, he said, if you were to just walk to the table read and you didn't know who she was, you would say, you need to fire that redhead because she doesn't have any idea where the comedy is. No, I mean, this is subjective. Yeah. But he said because of her incredible tireless work ethic, of course, by the time Friday rolled around when they were taping in front of a live audience, she was amazing. And she had worked all those bits. And then, I think at some point, even after working those, it seems like she would have to let go of that work, because now she's dealing with a live audience. And the great thing about theater is that you have an audience that you're connecting with. It's like, you know, a communication. So your timing is going to be slightly adjusted by them, too.
Well, I just want to ask you quickly, you're from Massachusetts, you still have family here, you're far into your career now, you've had sold-out audiences around the country, but do you still get nervous to know? And I think we talked just briefly before taping that this is one of the first times that you'll encounter this situation. Will you be nervous this far into your career to having the intimates watching you?
Yeah, probably. Like, it will be at the beginning of the show, I'll be, oh gosh, you know, my friends are out there, and I feel a little bit that, you know, even with family and everything, but as, you know, after the show gets moving, then that goes away. You remember you have to be in service, you know, of the script and of the characters, and you hope they're having a fun journey out there.
Well, I Love Lucy plays at the Colonial through December 22nd. Sirena Irwin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. We're so excited to be coming to Boston.
Great.
To learn more, visit ilovelucylive.com. Next, we'll examine another of Louisiana's treasures. Each week, Art Rocks celebrates an artistic or cultural element with unique ties to Louisiana. This week, we explore the Degas House.
The French Impressionist Edgar Degas is best known for his paintings and sculptures of ballet dancers and horses, but he also has an interesting connection to Louisiana. Degas' mother, Celestine, was born in New Orleans to a prominent French Creole family, the Moussons. Growing up in France, Edgar heard his mother fondly reminisce about her family back in Louisiana, so it was no surprise when Degas, at the age of 38, decided to visit New Orleans and the Mousson side of the family. The home where he was welcomed was a large and elegant house on Esplanade Avenue, where his uncle, Michel Mousson, a cotton merchant, resided. The home itself was built in the early 1850s, before the Civil War, when the prosperous city was expanding and developers transformed former plantation land into neighborhoods like this one along the Esplanade Ridge. Degas' visit in 1872 was after the Civil War and during the politically tumultuous time of Reconstruction in Louisiana. His stay extended from All Saints' Day through the New Year and Mardi Gras season, less than 5 months. But during that time, the famous artist produced over 20 works. Among those are portraits of family members and everyday life and amusements, and a notable glimpse of business life in the New Orleans Cotton Exchange. The grand home on Esplanade was eventually cut in two, and the left half moved 20 feet away. 2 properties meant more money for the developer. After 70 declining years as apartment housing, the Degas house might have slipped into obscurity, but for the interest of a man who grew up in the neighborhood. David Villarubia purchased the property and gradually began restoring the home and researching the history of Degas and his extended family. Villarubia bought and restored the adjacent house that had been separated from the original structure, linking the two with a tropical courtyard. For his efforts to preserve Degas' legacy in New Orleans, David Villarubia was honored in 2009 as a Chevalier of the French National Order of Arts and Letters by the French Ministry of Culture. Today, the Degas House acts as a museum, an event venue, and a bed and breakfast. Tours are even given by descendants of the Degas family.
And finally, for the first time in nearly half a century, the tapestries within the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts, have been cleaned and restored. It was an exhausting 7-month process, but the resulting splendour of these refurbished 16th century Flemish creations is more dazzling than ever imagined. Jared Bowen gives us a look.
One of the grandest spaces in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum is the soaring 4,000 square foot Tapestry Room. Opened in 1914 to house tapestries Mrs. Gardner collected over 35 years, it was also one of the first spaces the museum turned to after opening its new wing.
This room has just been refurbished, bringing this room back to the glory of what it once was.
The museum treated paintings, returned the tile floor to its original shine, improved the lighting, and completely restored its 14th century French fireplace. Perhaps most daunting, though, was the cleaning of its long-soiled 16th century Flemish tapestries like this one.
It hasn't been cleaned since the 60s, and at that particular time there were still fires in the fireplace, and we were still burning coal, so it was a rather sooty environment. So we need to remove some of those soot.
Tess Fredette is the textile conservator at the Gardner Museum. We met with her last October as she prepped the tapestry for cleaning. It's being sent all the way to Belgium.
Correct.
So that's the nearest place that you can go? You can't obviously take this to Zoot's.
Right, exactly. Well, this is actually, the reason why we're going to do it in Belgium is because they have this sort of state-of-the-art cleaning system that I believe is the wave of the future.
But first, one of the museum's most fragile masterpieces had to be removed and rolled.
It's more nerve-wracking a little bit because as a piece of cloth, it's very flexible. And so we want to be careful not to bend it, although once it curls onto the floor, it'll bend. So you have to make sure that it's really a gentle handling. Okay,
okay, passing it down to you.
Here. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Got it. Oops. No. And then we'll just get it unwound as soon as we can.
Over the fall and winter, the museum sent 4 tapestries to Belgium for high-tech cleaning. The result was a revelation, as we saw when we met up with Fredette again 7 months later. I mean, this is almost a new tapestry, isn't it?
It certainly is. It's so much brighter. It was cleaned. It had this heavy gray pallor of particulate soils all over it that have now been removed. They put the tapestry on this big suction table, and then they have this aerosol system in the ceiling that just slowly releases this mist. And they turn on the suction underneath, and so they draw it, very slowly draw it through the tapestry. And so the soils come with it.
Did you see what the soil was like? I mean,
yes.
What was that like?
It was very black. The clarity of the imagery has improved. The colors that were hidden beneath that grayness have popped forward.
With the tapestry laid out in the museum's conservation lab, Fredette says there are elements of the work, a hair laid bare, that she didn't even know existed.
But the hair is outlined on one side with a dark brown and on the other side with a navy blue, which really adds to that. It gives it a little bit more dimension. And that's not something that we could see before.
And with the tapestries returned to their space and pristine once more, the entire room is something generations have not seen before.
To learn more about the museum, visit gardnermuseum.org. And that does it for this edition of Art Rocks. Be sure to visit us online at lpb.org/artrocks to find information on upcoming arts events. While you're there, you can also watch any episodes you might have missed. So until next time, I'm James Fox Smith, and thanks for watching.